Chapter 11. Full Transformation. Ichigo woke up to the sound of chirping. Or, at least, what passed for chirping in this strange dimension. It was more like a series of high-pitched hums and trills, echoing through the alien forest. Groaning, he rolled over onto his side, only to be greeted by the feeling of long silky hair spilling across his face. He blinked. What the? Pushing himself up, he brushed the hair back, frowning. It was soft, smooth, and a very familiar shade of auburn. His eyes widened. No way, he muttered, his voice catching in his throat. Except, it wasn't his voice anymore. It was hers. Scrambling to his feet, Ichigo stumbled toward the small pool of water near their camp. He fell to his knees, leaning over the edge, and froze. Staring back at him wasn't Ichigo Kurosaki. It was Orihime Inoue. Fully, unmistakably Orihime. This is insane, he whispered, his breath catching. He reached up, touching his face gingerly. His fingers brushed against soft cheeks, a delicate nose, full lip. Even his eyes. Her eyes were wide and doe-like, framed by thick lashes. He pulled back, looking down at the rest of his body. The changes were no longer subtle. His frame was smaller, softer, and curvier. His hands, once rough and broad, were now slender and smooth. His clothes, which they'd adjusted over the last few weeks to accommodate their changes, hung differently on him now, hugging curves he wasn't used to seeing, or feeling. Ichigo groaned, running his hands through his hair, her hair, and glaring at his reflection. How the hell am I supposed to fight like this? He grumbled. Behind him, a voice broke the silence. Good morning, Ichigo. He turned sharply, nearly losing his balance as his new body reacted with more grace than he was used to. Orihime stood a few feet away, holding a bundle of sticks for the fire. Or rather, Ichigo's body stood there, smiling brightly. Orihime had changed, too. Completely. Ichigo stared at her, at himself, and felt a strange, disorienting mix of emotions. Her posture was more confident, her movements fluid, but powerful. His body looked natural on her now, like she'd fully adjusted to its strength and size. Ooh? Ichigo cleared his throat, wincing at how soft his voice sounded. Morning? Orihime tilted her head, studying him. Wow, she said, setting down the sticks. It really happened, huh? You mean the complete body swap? Ichigo snapped, gesturing to himself. Yeah, I think it's safe to say it really happened. Orihime laughed nervously, holding up her hand. Sorry, it's just, I guess I wasn't expecting it to be so final. Ichigo sighed, slumping onto a nearby log. You and me both. While Ichigo struggled to process his new reality, Orihime was already testing hers. She picked up a thick branch from the ground, holding it in both hands. With a quick squeeze, the branch snapped in half like a twig. Whoa, Orihime muttered, staring at the broken pieces in her hands. I didn't even use that much force? Ichigo, still sitting on the log, raised an eyebrow. You're going to have to learn how to control that. Otherwise, you're going to break everything you touch. Orihime laughed nervously, tossing the broken branch aside. I guess I'll have to be careful, huh? Ichigo watched her for a moment, frowning. It was strange seeing her in his body. Really seeing her? The way she moved, the way she carried herself. It wasn't just about strength. There was a quiet confidence in her now, a presence that hadn't been there before. And yet, she was still her. Orihime caught him staring and tilted her head. What's wrong? Nothing, Ichigo said quickly, looking away. Just don't punch anything, unless you have to. Orihime grinned. You're no fun. Over the next few hours, Ichigo and Orihime tried to adjust to their new realities. Ichigo spent most of the morning wrestling with Orihime's hair. I don't know how you deal with this, he muttered, tying it back into a ponytail for what felt like the 100th time. Orihime, sitting cross-legged by the fire, smiled. It's not that bad once you get used to it. Not that bad? Ichigo shot her an incredulous look. It's like having a giant living thing attached to my head. It gets caught on everything. Orihime giggled. Do you want me to braid it for you again? Ichigo narrowed his eyes. If you make me look like some princess again, I swear I'm throwing you into the river. Orihime's grin widened. You're already the prettiest princess here. Ichigo groaned, burying his face in his hands. Why did this have to happen to me? Later, Orihime decided to test her strength again, this time by helping Ichigo gather firewood. Okay, just try not to crack. Ichigo winced as Orihime accidentally snapped a thick log in half. Oops, she said, blinking at the broken pieces. Ichigo sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. You're supposed to carry the firewood, not destroy it. Sorry. Orihime said, laughing nervously. I'll be more careful next time. Ichigo shook his head, muttering under his breath. Unbelievable. As the day went on, the humor gave way to quieter moments of reflection. Ichigo found himself staring at his reflection again, this time in the still waters of the river. He'd always thought of Orihime as fragile, delicate, but now, standing in her body, he realized how wrong he'd been. Her body wasn't weak. It was agile, balanced, and surprisingly strong in its own way. And as much as he hated to admit it, he felt comfortable in it. Maybe I've been underestimating her, he muttered to himself, brushing a strand of auburn hair out of his face. Meanwhile, Orihime sat near the campfire, flexing her hands. They were rougher now, calloused and strong. She felt powerful, capable, but she also missed the softness of her old body, the gentleness she associated with herself. She glanced over at Ichigo, watching as he fiddled with his long hair again. Do you think we'll ever go back to normal? She asked softly. Ichigo looked up, meeting her gaze. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he sighed, leaning back against the log. I don't know, he admitted. But I think we'll figure it out. Together. Orihime smiled, her heart warming at his words. Yeah. Together? That evening, as the alien sky darkened into swirling shades of blue and purple, Ichigo and Orihime sat side by the fire. Orihime leaned back, staring up at the stars. Inoue. It's kind of beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, Ichigo said, his voice softer than usual. Their hands brushed, and Ichigo froze. He glanced down, noticing how small and delicate his hand looked next to hers, his old hand. Orihime didn't pull away. Do you think, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, that this is how we're supposed to be? Ichigo swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. I don't know, he said quietly. But I don't think I'd want to be here without you. Orihime turned to look at him, her eyes searching his. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world faded away, leaving just the two of them. Neither of them said anything more. They didn't need to. As the fire crackled softly, and the alien stars twinkled above. Ichigo and Orihime sat together in silence, their hands still brushing. For the first time since their transformations began, they didn't feel so lost. And maybe, just maybe, they didn't feel so alone anymore.